We're all set. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is Monday evening, September 9th, 2024. This is a regular meeting of the Gorham Planning Board. Would you please join me in pledging allegiance to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, as a courtesy, please silence your phones. You don't have to shut them off, but let's shut off that annoying ring. Thank you. Mr. Amon, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Frank.
Present.
Mr. Walsh.
Present.
Mr. Burrows.
Present.
Mr. Hager.
Here.
Mr. Benson.
Here.
Mr. Delaney. Mr. Delaney has an excused absence this evening.
Correct.
Mr. Nichols. Sorry, Ms. Nichols.
Here.
Sorry, I was on a roll there.
We wish Mr. Delaney a speedy recovery. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the next item on our agenda is the approval of the August 5th, 2024 Planning Board minutes. Mr. Burrows, as our secretary.
I reviewed the minutes. They appear to be accurate, and I will also say that they're well written and quite well summarized, but I found no exception to the minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
You know, David just stole my comments. I was reading them through and said, my God, these things are thorough. Extremely well done. Compliments to Nina.
Mr. Frank.
On the site walk note, one of our attendees his name was misspelled. Terry Deering. Maybe I have an outdated copy, I don't know. Minor detail, folks.
Anyone else?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as read, written.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Is there a second, please?
Mr. Frank?
Thank you, Mr. Frank. No other corrections? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you. Chairman's report. Similar to what we did last month, I'd like to try and get the audience and the folks at home, give them a little bit of a dialogue of what we do here. And not to catch Mr. Norton off base, but we recently had a site walk, members of the planning board, and there was some concern by abutters because it's 35 miles an hour here, it's 45 here, 35, and et cetera. Is that something, I don't mean to catch you off guard, but is that something you might be able to address?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the determination of speed limits on roadways, first and foremost, can be governed by design limitations, vertical, horizontal geometry. So whether or not you have steeper curves or more gentle curves, and then you have your rolling geometry, your vertical geometry. Road classification plays into that as well, secondary roads versus primary arterials, subcollectors. And then from there, the DOT can do speed studies, and usually they take a look at the 85th percentile, which means you know, that 85% of travelers are traveling at a specific speed and set the speed limit, you know, in accordance with that.
Thank you. I think the question was, and maybe it's not appropriate now, but as this parcel perhaps is being developed, is that something that they're going to ask the planning board to review, or is that automatically reviewed? Because the concern is to slow this section of road down.
I don't know if that particular development will trip a traffic management permit or a movement permit. It's likely not going to generate enough daily traffic to trip that. Now, you know, we can certainly ask for a speed study to be done, but again, based on the geometry of that road, arbitrarily changing a speed limit's not necessarily going to slow anybody down without enforcement.
True, true. Yep. Thank you. Thank you for that teaching point. Anyone else? Anyone else remember that? Thank you very much. I'm sorry to catch you off guard like that.
No problem.
That's all I have as far as the Chairman's report. Committee reports. The Ordinance Review Committee, Mr. Walsh.
The Ordinance Committee has not met since we spoke last.
Thank you. Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee, Mr. Frank.
we have also not met.
Thank you very much. Moving along, we have 5 items on the agenda this evening, but don't be dismayed or get your hopes up. I suspect it will be a long evening. I want to remind the audience, Planning Board rules, Section 8A14, no agenda item will be taken up at a meeting after 10 p.m. The lateness rule may be waived by consent of the majority of the board members present. So just anticipation of that, we won't be going past 10 unless we approve. Thank you. Item 1 on this evening's agenda is a public hearing, final subdivision and site plan, Triano Properties, Fairway Commons, a request to construct a 14-unit condominium at 93 McClellan Road, zoned SGCR, map 8-7, lot 41-18. The applicant is represented by Daniel Riley, PE of Sebago Techniques. Would someone from the planning department like to?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Just to back up one item on the agenda, the admin report, admin review. Minor
guilty. I'm
Site
sorry.
Plan
I
Review
apologize.
Committee has not met. We have not received any applications.
My apologies. Thank you.
Fairway Commons, this is the 3rd time this application has been before the board. It was granted preliminary subdivision approval on July 8th. And there's a few more waivers that have been requested. One is for street centerline radius standards. One is for hydrogeologic and septic system standards. The 3rd one is to allow, the requirement is in the ordinance to have 3 building materials. And the applicant has 2, so they're requesting a waiver to allow for the 2. We'll discuss that further as you go through. They are proposing on-site wells, and the flow test for that is going to be provided at some point. We just haven't received it yet. They haven't had a chance to do it yet. The requirement for sidewalks is required for sidewalks. They're in the pedestrian overlay zone, and so they have provided sidewalks within the development, and the requirement to the development, they are proposing to put sidewalks within their parcel connecting to another parcel, rather than along their road frontage. That's their solution. So the board should discuss that, and if you are okay with that, the discussion with the Public Works Director was that it would be extremely difficult to put sidewalks along the frontage, and so he was leaning toward suggesting to you that that would be appropriate to find a different way to make it happen. Let's see. They're working to determine availability of drinking water and doing a hydrogeologic analysis, and that report has been conducted. We need to make sure that we actually have that report in hand before we approve subdivision. The lot is not required to provide a Class A soil survey, and that is waivable because they don't need to do the net residential density calculation. So you may have already discussed that at the last meeting. Let's see. And then just to say there's a number of Wright Pierce comments, our peer review engineer, things that they would like to see adjusted in their plans. And with that, I turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a public hearing. I would like to invite anyone from the public. If you would like to address this issue, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Would the applicant like to address us?
Certainly, thank you. Thank you. My name is Dan Riley. I'm an engineer with Spago Technics here on behalf of Troiano Properties to discuss the project. And with us, Sam Troiano is here. Nick Troiano, who's spoken with you before, may arrive. He had an obligation at a city council meeting at another community, and so he's first on the agenda in both places. So he'll try.
Gorham's number one, though.
Well, you know, it helps. It pays to be first sometimes not. So we are here, as Carol noted. Thank you for the summary. This is the third review by the planning board. We had sketch plan review followed by preliminary approval in July. We are here for final site and subdivision review. And the plan that's presented here is really substantially unchanged from the preliminary plan that you saw and reviewed. I'll put a quick I'll walk through briefly some of the small revisions that we made to the plan, but primarily the changes are just progression from preliminary to final. From a layout standpoint, the only revisions made to the plan was the relocation of one unit from a building here to a building here. So essentially the project is 4 buildings, 2 4-unit buildings and 2 3-unit buildings. That's unchanged. We just moved 1 unit into this building for purposes of septic flow to make sure that the systems had the required separation for multiple systems that were required. The application materials does include the completed septic design for the 4 septic fields and includes updated grading on the plans relative to that to demonstrate the grading over the systems and in the vicinity of them. So that's an updated progression from preliminary approval. The utility layout has made a couple of revisions. One is to the electrical layout to avoid some conflicts that we had between on the preliminary plan between landscaping and trees to make sure we were clear of that. And we've also extended in the revised utility plans that you've seen, we have extended what will be a private well-supplied drinking and fire protection supply from a well located at the north end of the site. The utilities at preliminary plan had come down to serve the buildings, and we've extended those further down to about that location here at the board's request to allow for potentially a future connection if a public water supply makes its way to the site. As we've discussed before, this project is not directly abutting the project that the plan had preliminary review for on a larger parcel. There's an intervening parcel between those 2 sites. But in the event the water supply comes in either by coming up McClellan Road or coming across through developments, we've made provisions so that could potentially be connected to public water. And the only other real change to this is really related to street lights. We've added some additional lighting to even out some of the lighting that's proposed there, and the photometrics for that are included in your application. As Carol's presentation outlines, the board did approve 3 waivers at preliminary that we hope to continue. One is a waiver for the high-intensity soil survey. The site is located in a zone that doesn't require net residential calculations, and that's generally the reason for the high-intensity soil survey. So we have asked for to continue the waiver of a high-intensity soil survey for the project. And the board also granted waivers for the extension of public sewer and public water to the site due to the distance to the existing public systems. Consistent with the preliminary plan, there will be a privately operated water supply well. It'll be considered by the state a public water supply well due to the population that it serves. The applicant has received preliminary approval from the Maine Drinking Water Program that allows them now to do the extended drawdown test of the initial well drilling to demonstrate water capacity. So that's in the works. I don't know what the schedule of that, but it's happening soon when the well drill is available to do the drawdown test. The information that was included in your package were some preliminary information from when the test well was drilled. The well was drilled to about 200 feet. There were water-bearing fractures found at between 180 and 190 feet. A casing was installed, and the initial short-term test yielded 80 gallons per minute of flow without any fluctuation in the water levels, and a short-term 2-hour drawdown at 20 gallons per minute didn't indicate any changes in groundwater. But as you may be aware, the state program will require the preliminary approval for the well, which we've received, and then a more extended drawdown period to demonstrate the yield of the well, and that's in the works. As Carol noted in the application, we did include 3 waiver requests. And we believe a couple of those are likely either standards that we may meet if the board finds that way, or that may not be applicable, but we understood that the staff does defer to the board to make some of those decisions. So we've included those requests in here in the event that the board determines they're necessary and is agreeable to granting them. The first has to do with comments that we received on the radius of the driveway coming into the site. And as we discussed in the preliminary review, the project is accessed by a private condominium driveway. The driveway is not proposed as a public road or a private road. And although it's been designed so it could potentially be extended in the future, it still remains a private driveway. And so typically we don't believe that the road standards per se apply. However, we did provide some information in the application that sort of outlines how we approach the design of the driveway. And specifically, the alignment of the driveway comes in off McClellan Road, and then following the terrain and the layout of the property, follows a 135-foot centerline radius through this curve, and then continues on through the site. And so the comment is related to the radius of that curve. If this were a private road, one of 2 standards could apply. The town standards for a private road serving 7 to 10 lots requires a 130-foot radius. The next increment standard is a road design serving 25 or more lots, which requires a 200-foot radius. We had some discussion with the town staff in our meeting on our staff meeting on August 28th. The Public Works Department and the Fire Department were both present at that meeting. Our understanding is that they don't have any concern with the 135-foot radius as it's proposed on the plan. Due to the low population that the project serves, adequate site distance and grades, they felt that that was an appropriate design for a private driveway. And so if the board determines that the road standards do apply, we've requested a waiver to allow the 135-foot radius. I would just note that there were some comments, the latest comments we received Friday from Wright Pierce, again, sort of addressed this. They weren't privy to the discussions that we had had with the staff, and so they weren't aware that we had kind of worked that out with the staff. But just for the board's information, if that radius of this section of the roadway were revised to be 200 feet, it would essentially pull the edge of the roadway this direction, kind of to the south, towards the abutting property, and to the point where the shoulder of the road would actually be in the side setback. And so it just moves the grading and the construction of that closer to the butter than we feel is necessary. And so if in fact the board determines that the road standards would apply to a private driveway, we have asked for a waiver to allow the 135 feet, understanding the staff appears to be in agreement that that's an appropriate design. The second waiver request is the hydrogeologic analysis, the mounding and nitrate analysis in the ordinance. Typically, sites that have septic systems greater than 2,000 gallons per day, which is typically the threshold for an engineered system, requires a mounding analysis for groundwater and a nitrate analysis for impacts to that. Although the overall flow from the combined for the 4 systems is more than 2,000 gallons per day, no single system is any more than 1,080 gallons per day, and they are separated with all the separation standards that make them a non-engineered system from the site standpoint. There's a couple other factors that we wanted to point out as part of that request. If you review the test pit information that was submitted as part of the HHE 200 forms, in all but one of the test pits that were conducted on the site, there was no modeling of groundwater apparent. The limiting factor for these septic systems is the presence of ledge, anywhere from 2.5 to 4.5 feet below. And the terrain here, the septic systems are sort of a localized high point in the center of the site. And the systems, as they're arranged, drain in different directions. So the two larger systems drain, one drains this direction, the other drains this direction, and then the smaller systems drain generally in a northerly direction. So we don't think that there's a significant influence on groundwater. There was none present in most of the test pits that we observed. And so the mounding is less likely to be a concern. The other factor that we think plays into that is that as far as nitrates go, certainly a nitrate study can be performed. But as you can see from the site layout, each of those systems drains toward on-site wetland areas. And typically any nitrates that are present in the effluent of septic systems, as that progresses through, when it reaches the wetland area, that's generally mitigated very quickly because wetlands tend to take up nitrate analysis. And so in all the cases here, any nitrates that remain in the septic system are not likely to progress anywhere off-site. So those are the two bases of those, but certainly if the board's not comfortable with that, we have discussed it internally, and that hydrogeologic analysis can be performed, and we would just ask that if we potentially do that as a condition of approval if the board considers it necessary. The final waiver does address the building materials, and we have some in your package is our updated renderings of the buildings and updated elevation drawings. We submitted a revised sheet A200, which is the elevation drawings for the building. And as we listed in our application, we believe that we defer to the board, but the project as it's designed may meet the intent of the ordinance. The materials on the front of the facade include a number of materials. On the upper peak roof areas, we have a shake-style vinyl siding. We have vinyl clapboard siding in two colors, including a color sort of above the ground floor and on the ground floor. The windows and doors are aluminum clad. All of the trim shown on the building is wood painted wood trim, and the facade includes in between units on the front porches an architectural screen will be a composite building material. So we think from that standpoint, we've provided a variety of materials. If the board determines that that doesn't meet the requirement for 3 materials, then we would ask for a waiver on the basis of the language of the ordinance, which allows the board to grant a waiver of the number of materials if the architectural design of the building is detailed enough to break down the scale of massing of the building. And we also think that's accomplished. As you see from the application materials you submitted, the buildings are designed with a number of different traditional roof forms. We have peaked roofs in 2 directions, a dormer above the garage, and the enclosed covered porches. That combined, I think, with the articulated facade with the recessed doorway provides a good deal of architectural interest to the building and really presents a typical residential scale development. And so if the board feels that the materials presented don't meet the letter of the ordinance and a waiver is necessary, we would ask for it on that basis. So with that, I think that summarizes, in closing, I think that generally summarizes the changes. In reference to the Wright-Pierce comments, they did request some, adjustments to some of the details of our stormwater analysis. We received those comments late Friday. We went through all of that today. We've made the revisions. None of the changes to kind of get our stormwater analysis completely in sync with the plans had any measurable result on any of the design criteria or required any changes to the design. It was a matter of just getting a couple of the elevations matched up between the model and the final design plans. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Mr. Riley. That was a mouthful. Thank you. A lot of work done, a lot of work. I have a question before I turn it over to the board, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So on this rendering, great beauty. There's a bump out here. I believe that's based on sheet C100. That's probably for the mail storage area?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, thank you. I was concerned that it wasn't a driveway for some...
Yeah, there's a turnout at that location for a group mailbox for the development.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you. Please, members of the board.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I'll start off. Excellent presentation, Dan. Thank you. Just I want to start with a question for Chuck, for the town engineer. The discussion on the septic and the comments, read the comments from Wright Pierce. I've heard Dan's explanation, which is very thorough. What is your view of that issue?
Thank you. I don't see it much different than 4 systems that are less than 2,000 gallons per day that were in any other subdivision. And to the applicant's point, these septic fields are situated such that they drain with the topography, and so I understand Wright Pierce's comment as an aggregate. They exceed that 2,000 gallons per day, but individually they don't, which I don't see much different than any private single-family homes septic system.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Comments? David Burrows. Regarding the radius, the request for 135-foot radius, I actually see some advantages to that in that it'll calm traffic more than a stronger radius would, or a larger radius. So I see it as, the advantage in that it'll calm traffic down before it enters into the condominium area. So I think it could serve to slow traffic down. So I see the advantages of that. Regarding the limit on exterior materials, I think you've kind of overcome that quite well with the design, especially with the roof of the porch separating the upper and lower elevations, and the change of cedar shake imitation vinyl siding above and clapboard on the side. So I think that the design and the materials that are used overcome the requirement for having more than 2 materials. So I think that's solved. Other than that, it looks like a good development, so
Thank you.
good work.
Please, and Mr. Frank.
Mr. Frank, Mr. Burrows stole my thunder. I agree with his assessments. Thank you.
Miss Barbara Nichols, and I wanted to tell you, I'm happy to see that you've made some provision for down the road potentially getting into public water. So that's nice, but that's just the water, not sewer.
That's correct.
So you'll stick with those septic fields. Okay, and I had just a question about the building materials. I tried to do some research on that, and I know that this is kind of out of my normal realm of world, but what is the reason that you don't want to add a 3rd one? Just to simplify what you're getting in there and the workers? And
Yeah, I think, talking to the architects, the building is, relatively detailed, and they are multi-unit buildings, so there's some repetition to it. If you look at the site plan layout, you can sort of see, I didn't mention in my discussion there's some additional sort of articulation in the buildings in that they sort of step back from each other, sort of fading away from the site to give a little more privacy in what is a relatively narrow frontage. And so, the opinion in my discussion, I don't want to paraphrase, I'm not an architect, but I want to paraphrase it. But we felt that adding another material to what's already a fairly detailed and kind of a little bit intricate design kind of actually maybe takes away from it. It becomes busy. Adding a lot more texture and feel to it, we thought that the form of the building met the requirement, and that the materials, adding more materials in such a small facade would look busy. I don't know the genesis of the background of the standards that were put into this district, but from our discussion on other projects, this district envisioned and does envision, in addition to this kind of development, much larger scale multifamily residential, larger buildings. And in those kinds of buildings, multiple materials are sometimes the best way to break up the scale and massing of the building. And so certainly from a larger building, you can, I don't know what the right word is, but you can present more materials without it feeling cluttered or busy or taking away from the architecture itself. On a smaller, more residential scale building, that's a little bit harder to do. And I think you probably see that borne out just, in your life walking around buildings. You don't see a lot of buildings of this scale with lots of different materials. It becomes busy, and the architects thought that the form of the building met was an attractive building. It provides a lot of detail, and that adding more materials to that could take away from the architecture.
Thank you.
Thank you. Colonel Benson.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments on that, and I agree with I think it meets the intent on the building materials, but my question is to the staff, what is the intent of that section of the code, and specifically do not just this project, but just projects in general, because this comes up in other cases. So is a vinyl siding, but a vinyl siding that's done vertically versus horizontally, it's technically the same material, but it presents differently. So how is that written into our code?
I'll simplify it by saying two things. Our code generally wants New England character in its architecture and visually interesting architecture. So
It's ambiguous.
That's the idea behind the three materials.
Sure.
Without actually listing out 15 different criteria for massing and.
But he made a point about
voids and-
aluminum windows, and I don't know what the garage doors are, the composition of the garage doors are, but like how much of a third material needs to be used, and if you're asking us to make a decision or approve a waiver.
It doesn't include windows, it doesn't include doors,
Okay.
including garage doors. It's the siding, if you will. So in some cases, it might be brick foundation.
No, I understand what different materials are, but I'm saying in the case of, vinyl, vertical versus horizontal, or shake versus traditional siding, does that meet the intent of the?
In my opinion, there's
enough ambiguity to the code that allows us to
this is
make a
varied
decision.
enough.
Okay.
Because it has shakes and siding, clapboard style siding, in my opinion.
And what does the code say?
All of it, exactly what I've told you.
Okay, thank you. And then going back again to the staff, private way versus private driveway, and I know we've talked about this, but I am confused because to me, if you've got this many dwellings, that's no longer a private driveway. It seems like it should be a private way because it's accessing multiple multiple dwellings. So I'm confused based on our previous discussions about private driveways and what they were only allowed to service, I think, 2 dwellings. And this is presented as a driveway instead of a private road. So I'm confused. And so would like to be enlightened.
Generally speaking, a driveway does not have right-of-way lines. They don't have a property line along the frontage of each house.
Okay.
There is nothing related to that. A private way does have that. It's allowed to happen for condominiums such as this,
A driveway.
yes.
Okay.
It's specifically called out as a condominium drive.
Okay, I appreciate that. That was what I did not understand. Okay, thank you. And so is your recommendation that we pass these waivers, or are you just saying that because it seems ambiguous, that we can pass them if we feel we need to, but we don't have to, is the way it was kind of, that I read it. So I'm confused by that.
Here's how I would think about the building material question. Do you think that the building has enough visual interest and looks like New England character?
I got that.
That it meets the intent of the ordinance?
right.
That's that one,
Do we have to do a waiver or not
yes.
on all 3?
For the use of 2 materials rather than 3,
That's one, but there are 3 waivers.
yes.
So I understand that one.
The first one you must, the
Okay.
second one you must, and the third one you must. That is true.
Three independent
Okay,
questions.
yep.
Yes, yes.
I was confused because I didn't, based on earlier comments and how it's written, it seemed like it was up to us if we chose to pass like if we wanted to consider this as a waiver or not.
Oh, I see.
That's how it was presented.
It is up to you if you want to grant a waiver.
I understand that.
You don't have to.
No,
That's sort of the choice. That's how we put it.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Frank?
Yes, sir, thank you. Scribble my notes here, excuse me. We already waivered a condominium driveway option, unless my notes were wrong. Is that a true statement?
I think this question, though, is on the radius,
Well,
right?
I think Mr. Frank's trying to bring up previous waivers. On page 2 of our packet, the 3 waivers previously granted are noted. If you have page 2, items of note. So waivers granted are described: the high-intensity soils, the extension of public sewer, and the extension of public water, those 3.
Thank you, yes. So,
I don't recall any others.
just trying to reduce the burden upon us here.
Sure,
yes.
sure. If I may.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So we have 28 pages. I don't know if you've had a chance to go through each and every one. Perhaps you have. There are things, for example, if you allow me, please, on page 4 of 28. The fire department back in May was saying we will require at least 1 or maybe 2 public hydrants. Who's going to determine that? The fire department? And
The fire chief.
we're going to let the developer know, and I'm sure, but I like the no surprises rule myself. I haven't seen that that's been resolved. I'm just throwing it out there. Thank you. If you don't mind, if I can continue, other things I highlighted. I was going way back. On page 9, we're discussing with Wright Pierce this 135-foot radius. I am okay with it. That's just my personal opinion. That's one waiver that I might give serious consideration to. Allowing me to please go on. The septic, I will defer it to Mr. Norton. On page 12, Wright Pierce has got a lot of verbiage there about why they don't want to do it. I know we should rely on our peer review, but I'm also relying on our employee. I was on the fence about it. Can you twist my arms a little bit more?
I can preface my comments with I'm certainly not a hydrogeologic engineer, and I'm not a wastewater design engineer. However, in looking in the site plan, taking a look at each individual septic system and noting it, like I said, as individual septic systems and not one aggregate system, that would be my comfort level with it.
I'm looking at sheet C100. I know the lay of the land there. I know it flows downhill, and that's what we want when we talk about septic systems. We want things to flow downhill. So I may be more moved to approve that waiver. Last but not least, the 2 building materials. I am in favor of that because of the character, perhaps the colorization, some dividing lines in between first floor, second floor, et cetera, et cetera. I think it meets the straight face test, in my opinion. I would be happy to vote for that. A question on page 21, rhetorically. We're talking about houses being sprinkled. And so this is going to be a long-term project. We're not going to do these things overnight. I don't know what the plan is, 3 to 5 years? Quicker? I know someone's going to say a year, but come on, let's be realistic.
Quicker. The applicant's intent is to get going on these and get them built and get them developed and sold. As you know, they're interested in another parcel that has a pretty significant cost to bring water and sewer to it, and would really like to get this one in the ground to be able to proceed on that one.
Thank you. The question I have is, there's always these rumors about the council, town council perhaps, looking at this fire sprinkler ordinance. So if in effect today, they start the construction, they're gonna have to follow the existing ordinance. If in a year or two, that ordinance is modified, does this project continue based on today's acceptance of these plans in this ordinance? Or, what I'm getting at, I don't want to see 12 units had to be sprinkled in the last 4 or 5 don't have to be sprinkled. I'm just voicing that.
The applicant is certainly prepared to proceed with the project under the ordinances that are in place today.
Sure,
That's
I
our-
appreciate that. I guess it was more for
Sure.
the planning board side that I'm curious how that might affect any project that might come before us. I've spoken long enough. That's all I had when I went through my 28 pages.
I'm sorry, there was one other thing, please, on the sidewalks. Can you just talk about how the sidewalk plan was incorporated into the design?
Yeah, so our proposal has been, and I'm sorry, another project manager from our office took this through preliminaries, not with our firm anymore, so I've taken it up. So if I've missed or I misstate some earlier conversations, my apologies on that. Our proposal is to install sidewalks completely through the project site to McClellan Road. We've got some walking trails within the site, but the applicants, the last discussion we've had was that the applicant would pay the in lieu fee for sidewalks on McClellan Road that in the provisions for the ordinance, and that we're not, as part of this project, proposing to connect to any other development, because right now there is no other development to connect to. Okay. And so that's what the proposal is today, is that to use the in lieu fee for the public connection on McClellan Road, if there is one, and then provide sidewalks throughout the development on the interior.
Thank you.
Ms. Nichols first, please. Thank you.
I just wanted to follow up on what you were saying, Chairman, because I felt like I kind of got half a thought out, it didn't finish. So you were asking about if, for the fire suppression, because that I felt was a really good question. So if we start building and fire suppression is required, and you only have half of them built, in order to not have, because we're approving it through that, in order to have any change in that, I would guess it would have to come back to the planning board to have, or at least for a planning not.
I personally, I
think that's
I don't believe they would have to come back to the planning board, because if they're following the present ordinance or the future ordinance, that's what we're giving approval on. I could be wrong. The town attorney might have to weigh in on this. I personally don't think so, but
Just so you know, if something is a condition of approval that you have put in, they would have to come back to you to change any conditions of approval. So if in a future ordinance, we have some amendments, some changes, and then somebody doesn't need to sprinkle, then they would need to come back to you to remove that condition of approval. Then they could comply with the ordinance
okay.
as it would be,
There you go. Thank
as
you.
it might be.
Thank you. Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. One issue you skipped over when you're paging through was, just kidding you. There was some comments on page 6 from the Conservation Commission. And Dan, you mentioned the walking paths within the site. There's a request, and I'm sure you probably read it, from the Conservation Commission to know if those might connect or might be open to the public, particularly out in the back of the site, where people have had access in the past from the public for, walking or cross-country skiing if there's snow, et cetera. So I guess they were asking if they would continue to have access to any trails or paths that are developed as part of this site.
Sure. Well, as consistent with what was presented and approved at the preliminary approval, this is all proposed as private property. There's currently no proposed public access easements across the land, and that any sort of easement across that would ultimately be the decision of the homeowners association of the project once it's developed. But we haven't made any changes to that.
Okay, so there won't be any easement up front.
There's not an easement up front.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Frank, did you? No?
Going back to the fire suppression thing, we're here to approve what we have in place now. I mean, it's not for us to foresee what the town council or the state or the federal approves that we must do this. The applicant is presenting us with a good plan, in my view, and I see no reason to fuss about what might happen in the future by future laws. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't mean to muddy the waters by bringing that up. I'm sure I'll hear about this. But I've heard things around town. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, David Burrows again.
Burrows, please.
Even though David Walsh brought this up a minute ago about the Conservation Commission's requests, I would still like to see a study of public access to the trails that are there. Maybe something could be drafted that the homeowners association could adapt in the future, but to exclude it and not consider it, I think is a missed opportunity for anybody who enjoys hiking trails. And I know that has been a popular place in the past. And based on the comments and kind of the stance of the Conservation Commissioner, he was pretty emphatic that those trails really should be preserved for the public. So just encourage the developer to seriously consider keeping those for future public access.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers. Yes, Mr. Frank.
Thank you, Mr. Burrows. I had a note here for myself on page 6 about the public access. I underlined the word maintained. Public access to be maintained. I mean, we're talking about a potential construction project here. So I would suggest, minor detail if you will, that the word maintained might be replaced properly by public access planned at this stage, rather than something that, okay, this is where you can go, even though construction equipment might be in there.
I'll have to read. Well, I guess my comment to that is that the current landowner has allowed public access on their property, but I don't believe there's anything in the ordinance that requires a private landowner to provide that. So I understand people have potentially enjoyed this property in that way, but it is a different property after there's a residential development than prior. I don't know, Sam, if you have any opinions on public access, but like I said, the final plan is consistent with what was discussed and approved at preliminary. That doesn't have, as part of the initial development, public access easement on its property. There's a lot of unknowns in terms of what the turnpike's plans are for any access up there. It can certainly be provided in other projects, and the applicant's other project further down the road has direct connections in that case, but I don't think the ordinance requires that in the zone or otherwise.
Thank you.
Anyone else? We have 3 waivers requested. I'm sorry, Mr. Colonel?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay, please.
I move to grant a waiver to allow for private driveway surveying 7 to 10 lots, including a 135-foot minimum centerline radius, not the 200-foot radius required for private way surveying 25 or more lots.
Thank you, Colonel. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Anyone? We're all on board with this? We understand the centerline concept, et cetera? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion to grant a waiver to allow a hydrogeologic mounding analysis for the septic system. So a waiver,
Thank you. Thank you, Colonel.
that requirement.
Is Mr. Walsh?
Second.
Second. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Any discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you. 3 for 3?
Mr. Chair, I move to grant a waiver to allow 2 building materials rather than the 3 required based on the renderings that we have seen.
Thank you, Colonel.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Any discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you. Last but not least, to move this along, on page 27 of our packet, there is a series of conditions of approval. There are 17 items. I don't know if anyone has any exceptions to any of these. Mr. Walsh.
Chair, I guess I asked a question over to staff, listening to a conversation tonight. Are there any changes to those conditions of approval? Have we amended it in any way?
In lieu fee for sidewalk. You might want to add one in for that. That would be number 18 under the site plan standards.
Would you happen to have some good language for us?
No.
Something reasonable?
No, it's as simple as amended. So I think I think the motion could be just simply as amended by the planning board.
You have some language that we want to...
Certainly, that the applicant shall pay an in lieu fee instead of providing sidewalk to the development.
Well, the development does not exist at this point, so they're not providing a sidewalk to a development.
Proposed development? Friendly amendment? I would accept that.
In lieu fee to not construct a sidewalk.
Correct.
Does that work for everyone? We get the intent in there? That would be number 18. Colonel?
Well, they are constructing a sidewalk on site.
Yes. But this is a sidewalk that
Off-site
they are
sidewalk.
paying an in lieu
Yes.
fee
For off-site,
for McClellan, not to be on McClellan.
yes.
Would you concur?
Yes, that's correct. I'm sorry, I don't remember how the ordinance is written around that in lieu fee, but it's a waiver for the provision of public sidewalk on McClellan Road.
Perfect. That's it. A waiver for the provision of a public sidewalk on McClellan Road.
That's correct.
A waiver for provision
And
or
in
a
lieu
waiver?
of, they're going to pay in lieu of fee.
So a waiver
They don't need, I'm sorry, they
for
don't
the
need a waiver.
fee on McClellan Road.
No, they don't need a waiver. I misspoke.
Okay.
Yes.
The condition is just,
We're
they're going to pay
we're
a fee.
proposing to meet the requirements for public sidewalks on McClellan Road by payment of the in lieu fee as it's spelled out in the ordinance.
Yes. I'm sorry, I misspoke.
No, and I agreed with you.
So somewhere between the means and the extremes, that's number 18.
Yep.
Correct.
We're all comfortable with that? I don't want to belittle anyone or...
No.
So would anyone like to entertain a motion? Mr. Walsh? Or are we looking to the Colonel to close this deal?
I was looking to
Oh,
Bill.
I move to approve the final subdivision and site plan for Trujano Properties LLC in accordance with conditions of approval, as amended.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much.
How we doing? Okay? far as I look, there's nothing in there for us. Ladies and gentlemen, item 2, a discussion, sketch plan review, AFD Properties LLC, Tractor Supply Company. A request to construct a 22,000 square foot Tractor Supply Company retail store with parking and associated infrastructure on Ossipee Trail, Zone RC, map 76, lot 20. The applicant is represented by Doug Reynolds with Goral Palmer. Department like to open this up?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. This project is the first time you have seen it. The zoning is roadside commercial, which allows for this type of development. It's a retail operation. The area that this is in is not located in the pedestrian overlay zone. Therefore, the applicant does not need to provide sidewalk. The parcel is not located in a shoreline zone also. Some discussion items are an interpretation of what one double-loaded row of parking means. We'll come back to that, and I think our town engineer might have some words of wisdom on that. Also, the staff, they're requesting a reduction in parking, which the staff is recommending because they do not need it, and we would not want them to put more impervious coverage where it's not needed. And with that, I turn it over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Ironman. I apologize, someplace. Mr. Reynolds.
Good evening. Doug Reynolds with Goral Palmer. Don't see a plug that's going to allow me to plug in my computer to put it up on the screen.
Do you need help?
All kinds of different sizes.
Ben is coming down to save you.
Okay. Again, while he's coming down, I'm here representing AFD Properties. We're proposing to develop a 5-acre portion of tax map 76, lot 20, in the roadside commercial district. The overall parcel is 13 acres and owned by RGCS LLC, and AFD has an option to purchase approximately 5 acres for the development of a Tractor Supply store here on Ossipee Trail. Again, we're proposing a I got all the little guys.
Okay, is that an adapter you have there, or is this?
No, that's my. That guy to that guy, right?
Hopefully, yeah.
I got another one on that side. Beautiful.
There we go.
Here we are. Thank you, Ben.
He did save me. All right. All right, here we go again, back on Ossipee Trail here. I'll zoom in a little bit for you. We're proposing a shared driveway to serve both the Tractor Supply and Parcel B, which is there's no plans for development at this point yet, but again, is to save curb cuts on Route 25. We're going to share that driveway. Parking will be along the frontage of the building and come off to the, I guess that's the east of the access drive. Just to clear it up again, the building is on the left-hand side, which is about 20,000 square feet, and there's again, you've probably all been to a Tractor Supply. There's the outdoor display area that's fenced in, allows access through the outdoor display for trailers if you're picking up larger items. And again, the parking is all up front here. Loading is in the back. Again, there's a number of outdoor display areas along the frontage of the building, as well as along the front of the site. We are showing in this concept 77 parking spaces, which is a reduction from our original sketch plan package, which had 88. Based on discussions with staff, we removed a row of parking along this frontage here and reduced down to that 77 because, again, in this day and age, we don't want to have more impervious than we needed. Currently, right now, we're proposing septic and water with a storage tank for fire suppression. Stormwater right now is going to be in the back. It's going to be an infiltration basin. We're going to be going to the MDP for a stormwater law permit. Currently, there's about a 50-foot landscape buffer along the frontage of the site. What else did I have? There was a question in the planner's notes about the percentage of outdoor display area, whether it was less than 25%, and we're at 12.3% of the overall property. Anything else that I want to talk about? Again, one of the waivers we're requesting is the aforementioned parking reduction, and the other is the connection to public water. Currently, right now, the closest water main from Portland Water District is about 3,000 feet to the west towards Buxton. 3,000 feet of water main would be on the order of $1 million to extend that, and that wouldn't be cost effective relative to a storage tank and a pump. With that, we can, I'll be happy to answer questions and have any discussions you'd like to have. Again, we appreciate staff going through this project. It's been great so far, and we're happy to come in here with this store.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Any questions from the board? Yes, please, Ms. McNichols.
I'm going to go back to what Ms. Ironman said earlier about double-loaded rows of parking. I'm assuming that's this.
Let's zoom right in.
Yes.
That's along here. We had again 2 drives, so 2 rows with double stack parking on both sides. By changing this out to be the outdoor display, now we just have two drives along the frontage of the parcel, and that was based on discussions with Mr. Norton and Mr. Poirier.
And was the concern to maybe to limit it, to not have more than one section of double road parking? Is that?
Traditionally, before the question came about, before the specific plan came to us, we have considered 1 drive aisle and 2 directions of parking as the 1 double loaded row. Until Mr. Reynolds' plan, and he came in and he said, but it is 2. It's over here and it's over here. And so there is a split decision in the planning office. And so we said, let's bring it to the planning board. And you can break the tie, possibly.
So whether we would call that a double loaded parking?
It is half our opinion. Half the staff think that it's 1 aisle with the parking spaces on either side of the drive aisle. And the other half of the staff think this picture right here is the 1 double loaded row, because there's 2 aisles and 2 rows, or 4 rows. So we're leaving it up to you.
Mr. Frank.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like the idea of the potential shared driveway for other developments. I mean, it only makes sense, right? Otherwise, curb cuts and traffic studies and all that. So, thank you. Good idea.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, Mr. Walsh, yes.
Yeah, Dave Walsh. But I want to piggyback on my colleague's question. When I look at the site to the, I guess that's to the west, parcel B, it's a larger site, larger lot.
Yep.
Does the existence of that driveway constrain the future use of that lot in any way?
Based on the opinion of the seller, not at all. That's exactly how they wanted it. They requested it to be that way.
So I guess I'll throw it over to Chuck. Is there enough room to put another driveway into parcel B if a future business required it?
Can you zoom in on the frontage of parcel B?
Yep.
It's like 578 feet.
Yep. Yeah, we're 385 and there's 578.
Yeah.
Technically, without looking at the access management standard, I believe Ossipee Trail in that location is 45 miles an hour.
It is.
I'd have to look at the tables, but I think that's somewhere in the ballpark of 400 feet between driveways. But I would say that shared driveway would be very attractive, should be very attractive for any future business to connect to.
No, I mean, I agree with Russell in that it's great to plan ahead like that. I just wanted to see if there's a possibility that it actually constrains the use of that lot.
Out looking north on Ossipee Trail to see where the adjacent parcels entrance is, I would say there could be, but I don't have all the information at this point.
Yeah. Otherwise,
I would add one thing to that.
Sure.
Because there is a wetland on the other parcel.
Okay.
So that's more of a constraint than,
Parcel B has a wet?
yes,
Oh, it does, okay.
than a driveway location.
Yeah, no, definitely hear you on that one. Okay, otherwise, I like the looks of your plan.
Thank you. One thing I did forget to mention is we did provide building elevations. Again, you've probably all been to them. It's Tractor Supply. Ms. Ironman asked for a couple of additional items. We are going to provide a black vinyl coated fence for the outdoor display area. And there's CMU walls, split face concrete blocks, hardy board siding, and again, the front awning is the standing seam roof panels.
Mr. Reynolds, that version you have of C-101, that drawing has been revised from the C-101 that we have in our packs. The lower left-hand corner.
I'm not sure. I mean, I submitted this one the day after Labor Day to the staff. I'm not sure if it got into your packet. The previous one was this one.
So that radius, as you come in and you turn to the right, is a radius right? Yeah, well, if you move, no, slide, yeah, down, right there.
Yep.
So if we go to the previous drawing.
Yep. All that is squared off is because this is trailer display area.
Sure, I just wanted to point out to the board that the drawing that we're looking at on the screen is not what we have in our packs.
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. Because again, we had parking out there.
Sure.
On the previous one, and staff discussions had us remove one row.
Thank you. Mr. Burrows, please.
Hello, David Burrows. A couple of questions. How does the square footage and number of parking spaces of the proposed Gorham store compare with the one that is in Wyndham?
I don't know the count, the parking count over there, and I can find that out for you. In my recollection, they have too much parking over there. Building is the exact same size. I've done probably about 10 Tractor Supplies, and they're all 20,000 with a 19,000 square foot. And again, they finally figured out that, yeah, 77 spaces is really
Okay,
all
so
they
22,000 square feet in Wyndham?
Yep.
Same as this?
Yep.
Same layout?
Pretty.
You don't know you're in a different store once you're in it?
Pretty much. I didn't do the Wyndham one. I'd done, again, Augusta and Thomaston, a few others. But
Okay,
again,
it helps to understand. I didn't know if this is going to be smaller or bigger than the one I'm
no,
familiar with.
same size.
Okay. And then parcel B is what, 585 feet wide or 578 feet?
Yep.
And is the parcel to the west of that, is that the Kubota tractor?
That's Kubota, yes.
Okay, so
Yep.
it helps me to know where this is.
Yeah, again, looking at this one, this overall, I believe the Kubota is going to be almost the same, the driveway is almost the same width again, further to the northwest. But I'm not sure.
Okay, those are all the questions I had. Thanks.
Yep.
Yes, Mr. Frank, please.
Follow up on the parking. Personal observation, I'm a big fan of Tractor Supply. I've been to both the Scarborough and the Wyndham, and Wyndham, there's plenty of parking.
Oh, yeah. That's the one I go to.
That's all.
Mr. Reynolds, if you don't mind? Thank you. So in the packet, again, we have two drawings, C-102, but they're actually different drawings. One's a preliminary utility plan, the other one is a site, preliminary grading and drainage.
Yep.
Is one of those been renumbered?
What did I do, give you 101 and a 101?
No, 102 and 102. 102.
So that was, the one you just looked at, C-103, what was the title block, please?
101, 102, 102, look at that. Yeah. Oops, sorry. Yeah, 103 is going to be the grading plan, yeah. We'll work on my engineers on the counting and stuff.
You need a good clerk for those things. Members of the board, anything else? This is a discussion sketch plan review. We do have a waiver in the back if you're so inclined. Colonel Benson, you're
I'd
on.
like to grant a waiver for Chapter 2, Sections 222, to allow 76 parking spaces rather than the required 110.
Thank you, Colonel. Is there a second?
Second?
Well, I'll defer to Ms. Nichols because she raised her hand just before you said something.
Whatever.
Hey.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Third. Any other discussion on reducing or allowing the reduction of parking spaces? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion
Colonel, please.
to grant a waiver from Chapter 2, Section 210B, which requires the extension of the public water supply. So we're requesting a waiver so that they do not have to extend public water supply system to the new development.
Second.
Thank
I
you.
will second that.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, we'll look forward to coming back, and thank you for connecting me.
Thank you. Been a lot of buzz about this project, so good luck. Are we doing all set? Anyone need to shake their legs? We good? We keep going?
Press on.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is item 3, a discussion, final subdivision, KV Enterprises Incorporated, Roby Street subdivision, a request for final approval to construct 44 single-family residential lots, M24, L20, and M25, L8, zone urban residential and urban residential expansion. The applicant is represented by Mr. Sean Frank, PE with Sebago Techniques. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Let me go to staff first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to introduce this item, so it's the 7th time it's been before the planning board. It's part of a proposed multi-phase residential development, including multifamily and single-family homes. The applicant has applied for a contract zone for the development, which is under consideration by the town council. This is the proposed phase 1 of that multi-phase development. It's being proposed, however, under the existing zoning, not under the proposed contract zone. So that's what it's being considered under this evening. And what's before you is a proposal for 44 single-family homes. The board did grant preliminary approval for this back in February of this year. So the applicant came before the board at the June meeting with a proposal for final approval. The board gave the applicant some feedback. Peer review staff and peer review engineer also gave the applicant feedback, which they've now taken into account and come back with a proposal that addresses many, if not most, of those comments. As summarized in this memo here, some items of note to draw to your attention. That street connections, so there's 2 connections are proposed with a third under consideration, and that's shown on the plans. The 2 that are currently possible to do are at Roby Street and Bramblewood, and then a third proposed at White Birch Lane. Currently, there's an effort in progress to schedule a review of that for the town council. For pedestrian connections, sidewalk connections are required and are being proposed. Space requirements, there is a letter that's in place in front of the planning board members from Presumpscot Regional Land Trust, stating that they are interested in working with the applicants to secure 51 acres plus of conservation land that would be open to the public with trails. The applicants also proposed a number of additional open space recreational opportunities, active recreation space on the property that would meet the requirements in the ordinances. As far as the existing ordinances they're coming in under, they're coming under development transfer, which allows slightly denser lot development. It allows them to add additional units for a fee, which they have not triggered yet because they haven't surpassed that amount that they'd be allowed to add to the development, given the large area. And some additional items, the applicant is required to include street trees every 50 feet under development transfer, so we've asked them to please include that in the plans. They have received their main DEP permit. They have their Portland Water District ability to serve letters, and there are some additional peer review comments in the memo from Wright Pierce that we would look to have them address. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you for additional discussion here from the applicant.
Thank you, Damon, I appreciate that. Mr. Frank, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Sean Frank. I'm a civil engineer with Sebago Technics in South Portland. With me tonight are the applicants, Vincent Maeda and Kendrick Ballantyne, as well as the Chief Operating Officer of Sebago Technics and the registered landscape architect. Seems we thought we might discuss a little bit of open space with you tonight. As Kylie Mason. As Damon stated, we were blessed here in front of the board back in June. As he also stated, this is now our 7th meeting to discuss this phase 1, if you will. Obviously, the overall development will be precluded upon working our way through the council. But in accordance with that original approval of, the discussion with the board in June, We have gone a step further in terms of meeting with the council to try to iron out the details associated with the right-of-way connection through the village school and over to White Birch Lane. In association with that, we have defined that right-of-way. We have actually designed that access road, which is part of the plan package that you folks have, and we are trying to coordinate the final resolution of that with the council, hopefully later this month. Other things that were asked for were like the homeowners association docs, as Damon mentioned, DEP, the Portland Water District. We finalized the details. As you recall, the pump station will be turned over to the Portland Water District so that it'll provide service not just for this development, but future developments as well, to approve both the water and the sewer associated with that, to coordinate the response to the staff review, which we did as part of our last submission. We do understand now that there are some final review comments that we saw from the peer review engineer. Certainly see those as relatively straightforward. Again, in working with staff in terms of actually showing the street trees on the plans to get that taken out as well. Open space, I think, was a big discussion that we had with the planning board at our last discussion. As Damon stated, you do have this letter now from the Presumpscot Regional Land Trust. As you will recall, part of the conveyance of this property actually includes 51 acres of land that will remain undeveloped and will actually be conveyed to the land trust. And you can obviously from their letter see their excitement in association with providing a trail system and access to that to the overall Gorham community. As part of that, Kylie and her landscape architectural staff has tried to take that into consideration in terms of the open space requirements associated with this. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask Kylie perhaps just to give a quick presentation regarding the open space. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Kylie Mason. I am a Maine registered landscape architect. I'll just really quickly put up a different exhibit and walk you through the intention of the open space. And I'll turn this here. So just to give you context for the plan, this is the overall parcel. This large area in green is the 51 acres that would be conveyed to the Presumpscot Land Trust. And as you know, we've been working diligently with them throughout the entire project, so they've been involved from the very beginning. To that, I'll show you the next component, which would be the project as you are looking at it now, the first phase with its green space in the middle. Does this actually work so I can take it with me? I think that works. Right?
No. No, it should work. Keep talking. It takes a second
It is on?
to
Yes, that's on. There you go.
All right, I'll take it with me. So just to give you an orientation, so between lot 38 and 39 is a proposed formal green space. This would actually consist of green area, the preserved trees that we can keep in that area, as well as a small pedestrian plaza and a small sidewalk area. And this would be envisioned to connect to a larger picture.
Need more hands? That's perfect.
Look at that. Together we can do anything. All right, and this shows you the vision of how all those interconnected formal spaces would connect to the greater picture, providing pocket parks, amenity areas, interconnected walkways. It really creates a multi-generational connection within the development itself so that it's not a one-service pocket park. So you would see those connecting through. You would see them at all intersecting nodes, a number of community garden spaces, and then, of course, the 51 acres. And so that is how this project envisions putting the 1.98 acres, I think I'm off on my math, 1.93 acres of formal dedicated space, as well as the 51 acres. And if I were to show you the formal for this phase, I don't have technology with me. I got it.
You got it.
I just need 2 more arms. you can get an idea of how that interconnected green space would bring that parkway through, and you can get an idea of just the canopy we're hoping to preserve, as well as an idea of the sidewalk and the bench areas. So a nice intermediate area to break up that streetscape facade, offering a little bit of green and soft space between the development. I'll be your assistant.
I think you know I'm good. I'm just going to go back to that one. So as this board will recall, a lot of the conversations we had as we started through the overall concept was the interconnectivity of everything, to have the mid-block connections, if you will. So I think in terms of the open space plan, which Kylie was presenting, the whole intent of that was, again, mid-block connectivity, if you will, working its way all through the development and back into the open space to tie back into the potential trail system that's being discussed with the Regional Land Trust. With that, Mr. Chairman, I think we've concluded our presentation. We hope we have addressed the majority of the items that were discussed at the June meeting. We do appreciate time with staff. We did meet with them at the staff meeting 2 weeks ago. Again, we see the final items, if you will, contained as relatively straightforward. It is a condition of approval that we address those through staff. So certainly, if the board would be comfortable, we'd certainly appreciate a final approval of the 44-lot subdivision. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board has. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. If I can jump ahead, because I know the board has many things. I'm very pleased, as I'm sure everyone else is, to see pocket parks. I'm looking at, can you randomly go through the drawings, sheet 19? Or I'm looking between lot 38 and lot 39. So we have a little bit of a pocket park right there?
Yes, we do.
Is that just curvilinear, there's no stream or anything else like that? That's just...
No, that's simply for just to weave around the trunk. So what we did is we actually located all the trees that are there, and then we determined where the pathway was going to go.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you very much for clarifying that. I appreciate it. That's all I have right now, thank you. Any other members of the board, please? Mr. Walsh.
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to see the pocket parks. Honestly, though, I think you've heard before, I would have liked to have seen you utilize more of the space in this area to add a little bit more, but I see what you've added. So just to clarify, you've already gone out and identified and marked those trees that would be in that
within the
lake.
specific phase, that's correct, yes.
How will those trees be protected during the construction phase?
So within the plan set that you have, the trees that are shown are the trees that are proposed to remain, and so those would have a protective tree barrier around them. They'll be protected to the best of our ability, but generally that's the orange perimeter fence, normally the same size as canopy.
Sure. So, but if any of those trees are lost, just, the roots get hit, it happens.
Sure.
Will they be, will you replace and plant other trees in those pocket parklands?
Sure. I think it's a good question. I think given the type of trees that are there, I think it'd be dependent on what, if anything was impacted and if it can be replaced. So you have to think about the canopy of what's existing. Sometimes our best intentions is to say, absolutely, we'd replace the tree. But if the canopy is such that it doesn't make any sense to put another tree within that location, I think we just need to be mindful of it. So I think the goal would be to make it always a desirable green canopied area. And I think as long as that intention is there, I don't know that I could say it's going to be replaced in kind, but suitably canopied.
The other thing, thank you for that answer. The other thing is, since construction will likely, remove most of the other trees.
Correct.
Right? And that lot has already been cut over. It's been thinned. Mm-hmm. And there are some beautiful trees out there, there's no question of that. The issue of wind comes up. You take down a lot of trees and you leave this narrow lane. Now you have potential for hazard trees. And will that be taken into account?
You mean a hazard tree within the green space?
In other words, you have some mature trees in that narrow space. The roots have been, you've done construction on one side, loosened up the soil. The roots can you give a good rainstorm and a good windstorm, and those trees could start coming down. And how will you protect that, or will you, take steps in advance to remove those trees?
I guess, help me catch up with you. So are you speaking of the green space in the center or the overall development?
No, the green space in the center. I'm just really, what you have is the equivalent of a house lot width.
Sure.
Pocket park. And you're going to leave mature trees, and on either side, likely construction will involve taking the other trees down, and that happens.
Sure.
Now you're going to have some mature trees in a fairly narrow space, and could be subject to wind taking them down.
I think like any cleared area, I think whether it's tree canopied or not, I think you're going to see tree loss. I don't know that there's, I don't know there's a suitable answer that would satisfy the question you're asking, other than it's of course in the applicant's best interest to make sure the trees don't fall on any development. So I think that they're going to take the suitable precautions to make sure that there's no tree falling on a built structure.
Yeah, okay, very good.
Mr. Walsh, to piggyback on that, many of us probably remember this microburst
December?
10, 12 years ago.
Oh.
I am not anti-tree. I am pro-tree, but I had no trees after that microburst. Bob Lowell, I know he remembers this because it came right through our area of Newton Drive, et cetera, across the golf course. I guess the concern I have is that any tree based on its height, how close are you to a building? And I think, Mr. Walsh, to you, if there's some weather event, are we planning on keeping trees far enough away so that homeowners insurance doesn't go crazy because you're within a certain distance?
Yeah,
I'm not trying to paraphrase you, but...
No, I'm just saying you have a very well-intentioned, narrow, treed area. And I'm dealing with my own subdivision right now. We have a hazard tree right on a property line.
Sure. That's
going to have to be removed. And it's just, all right, now we have to fight over who's going to pay for it,
Sure. So as I said, we've gone through and located all the trees within this area. There were a number of trees we already anticipated would be claimed as part of the construction or would be impacted by the grading on either side. So we've already removed trees that were inventoried from the plan set that you have. So the trees that we're showing remaining, we believe, are probably within the area that would probably be very low impact from the lots on either side of it. In terms of tree height, and if there was a fall risk, I guess the alternative would be to remove the tree and put in a different tree. I don't think that we're there yet. On either side of the property, 38 or 39, we're really talking about a beech, 2 pines, actually 3 beeches and 2 pines. And I don't find those to be trees that would pose a great risk to a structure depending on their height. If they're a significant pine, a white pine that would fall or could break in half, then I think probably the flexibility granted to the applicant to remove it and replace it with a similar species, right? Because I think in those particular areas, we're not in a canopy risk.
Okay, all right, just
sure, and
thinking it through. That's what
no,
I'd just
sure,
like to see.
absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Nichols, please.
To kind of tag on to the same topic here. So when trees are in the middle of a forest, a canopied forest, they generally don't have, they either have branches on one side trying to reach for the sun or on another side trying to reach for the sun and are not well balanced. And when you cut all those other trees out, you may end up with unbalanced trees, which are what we see on the side of the highway when they went and they cleared all that. Now all of a sudden you see all these trees rooted all over. So I think just mindfulness of that, and that that may be part of your world nowadays, is to be mindful of that and watching to make sure you don't have a tree that's not balanced, and if it isn't, that you either, if it's one that you've selected, put in some safeguard. I don't know if a cable would be or what it would look like.
Sure.
But you just mentioned 4 trees, and there's a lot more than 4 trees there.
Sure, those are the ones that are aligning the property line.
Oh, okay.
So, and I guess to Sean's point, and I think a member of the board brought it up, this has been a managed area for quite some time. So we're not talking about a untouched forested canopy where you would have that kind of limb integration where they're fighting for sunlight. Again, I'd like to think that we've done our due diligence in making sure that the trees that are along the edge of the property line are the right ones and not all of the trees. I think we did a good job specifically of not promising all the trees, but rather the right trees remain. And the heavily dense trees are actually within the center of the lot itself, not along the perimeter. And I think that makes a large difference on what we're proposing here. But they're all very good comments.
I have another question.
Please, go ahead.
On the other map that you've shown, can you just remind me where Phase 2 and Phase 3 are?
So
Were
phase
they
2
on
would be
one of-
directly, well, I don't know that you've determined phases, have you?
I think one of your pictures might have showed it, so they're just stacked, one right on top of, yeah. So during Phase 1, are you gonna just be cutting Phase 1?
Absolutely.
And leave everything else
Yes.
there until you're ready to go into Phase 2 or Phase 3?
Phase 1 of the necessary infrastructure, so obviously that would include, the access drive to the pump station itself, the stormwater management pond, and the access road going back to White Birch Lane. Aside from that, no, we wouldn't be doing any additional cutting within that area. Again, this is the plan we have at this point in time. As you all know, this is kind of predicated upon a contract zone process that is somewhat still in flux, if you will. So again, I think in terms of the overall plan, what we really wanted to show in association with this was, again, the overall 51 acres and how this kind of connected into it. And the fact that as part of the overall plan as showing, there are areas within there that we can provide the required active open spaces defined within the ordinance. That was really the whole point, if you will, of the overall plan, understanding that this overall plan, for all we know, could change quite dramatically between where we are today and where it might be when we come back in front of this board.
Yeah, so the 51 acres, do they get transferred during this build-out of these 44 structures? Or is that only if the contract zone is?
No, that's part of the sale of the property. So that actually
That's gonna happen.
occurs
Okay.
basically concurrently with the applicant buys the property, if you will,
Yep.
and the conveyance to the land trust occurs.
Perfect.
Vinny, that's my understanding, but before I open my mouth.
Vincent Meyer, I'm with KV Enterprises. That's completely true. We want to have all this stuff done up front as part of Phase 1, but we want to make the board understand this is what we intend to do for the overall project. So all of the things that we're proposing to do here, we think we're going to do all of those things, but for sure, we're putting up the 51 acres as part of Phase 1.
Yeah, thank you.
But I don't want to come back to the next meeting and do the next phase and go, okay, now you need to put up another 11 acres or something like that. So we need to put up 13 to do the entire project. I think it's 13.1, and we're going to definitely put up 51 acres right away. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Walsh?
Oh.
Then Mr. How about Mr. Frank?
Yeah.
We haven't heard from him. Thank you. Mr. Frank?
Yes, you have. General comments about the trees. Barbara, you didn't participate in the site walk?
No, because I didn't get on the board until April, so I missed a lot of this, so.
There's a lot of trees here, and I think these folks are respecting the best conservation, if you will, practices of the trees. And talking about weather, what if a storm comes along? We're not weather forecasters. We can't predict which tree will be blown over or which trees will survive. So I think that we should remove that from our domain of consideration here. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I want to just switch topics a little bit and really come back to staff. If you could just brief us on what is the status of the contract zone?
That is a good question.
I know.
I only know about White Birch Lane. White Birch Lane is scheduled to go in front of the council sometime in the next 2.5 weeks.
Okay.
The contract zone, I do not know.
Okay. So at this point, so the contract zone's an unknown. The White Birch Lane is that part of this phase right now? So if we're being asked, Stephen, to approve, not knowing if White Birch Lane is a done deal or not. Is that correct? Yeah.
That would be true.
Well, if I can give my little 2 cents worth on that, because as you may recall, as part of the preliminary for Phase 1, the condition of the approval was this connection to White Birch Lane by this board. Yes. And as part of that, we pursued it with the council, and we did have a meeting with the council, and then did discuss, if you will, the right-of-way going across and where it would be located and those types of things. There are obviously some additional works that have to go on with that, but we did, based upon that, go forward with the design. We've defined the right-of-way associated with that. We've done the actual design work associated with that and submitted that to town staff with the understanding that the council's the only one that can actually approve that right-of-way, if you will, going across the school property, which is the formal action we still need to kind of final up with, hopefully at the end of this month. Again, we did have a positive meeting with the council, and which kind of led us, if you will, to go forward. So there was a condition from this board on the preliminary approval for this connection as part of Phase 1, and we would anticipate that, that same condition is part of the final approval.
So if the planning board was to approve tonight, it would be a condition of approval that White Birch Lane be approved. And what if it is not?
That is a good question. Then obviously, if we're going to be huddling ourselves, go right ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. If I may, I think we're trying to suggest to the council that we have reviewed this in great detail and that it has our stamp of approval. And it's a hint, if you would, that if it's our job to review these in great detail, look at the drawings, review with planning department, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, if all these things all come together, I think it gives the keys to the council to say, someone else has approved this in greater detail, which is perhaps our responsibility. And then hopefully it's, I don't want to say rubber stamped, but they respect the work that we have done with others, and it goes forward. Now, you need 4 votes.
And if I could just add to that, Mr. Chairman, as this board may recall, as part of the preliminary approval, the chairman of the planning board at that time actually wrote a letter to the council in terms of their, I forget the word we were using at the time. I wouldn't say insistence, that seems too strong, but their recommendation, if you will, to approve the right-of-way going over to White Birch Lane. And that was a letter that was actually prepared by the board and forwarded to the council at that time.
Thank you. Colonel?
Yeah, so should that not be listed as a condition of approval? Because it's not here, at least I can find it. I thought we had that conversation. And I know at least we talked about it, publicly said that this would be this could be a problem going forward, or in our consideration if the White Birch connection was not approved by the town council. So can it be, or should it be, or is it should it be in the conditions of approval?
I don't think it would hurt if it's in there, because it's also a reminder if it's in there.
Right.
I don't know what's going to happen if it goes south. It doesn't matter what language I think we have in here. If they've made the opinion, perhaps,
Well, if it didn't get passed, then they'd have to come back with a different plan.
And I'm not speaking for staff, but my assumption is that the plan we've submitted to you folks shows a connection to White Birch Lane. So that's probably why they didn't have a specific condition of approval, is that our plan is proposing a connection to White Birch Lane.
That's true.
And also, it is not a requirement. The 44 lots are completely, and everything they have done to this point in preparation for approval, it is approvable
As presented.
as presented.
Yep.
With a, they've got a couple of things to do in terms of stormwater and doing a couple of things there, but it is approvable. With or without White Birch Lane.
It is approvable. I'm not going to argue that. That doesn't mean that the board will approve it, just means that it is approvable. So the discussion was that some of us had concerns that with the construction traffic and so forth, that there was access through White Birch Lane, and that, and in good faith, the applicants have gone forward, and that's what they're pursuing, and I appreciate that and applaud it. And if for some reason it's not approved by the town council, then I would think that we should at least be able to reconsider and have a discussion about what happens to the plan if that is not get approved by the town council.
Well,
and I think that approving it with it as a condition sends a stronger message to the town council that, look, we've looked at this and we approve it, but we, in the strongest way possible, because it's a condition of approval, for this to go forward, town council, approve this plan for White Birch.
Can I add a little,
I guess so.
what I call yeah, but clause? A condition of approval that says the planning board recommends a connection through White Birch Lane. I leave it to you.
I won't discount that. I'm going to go back to Colonel. I'm going to say, Mr. Frank has brought some of these ideas up earlier. The merits right now are this 44-unit subdivision. We hope in the future, strongly hope, that White Birch Lane is part of that as the project gets developed out. But it does not have to be developed for the project to go forward right now as it stands, the 44 units. I'm not sure if we're poking the bear by putting that in there.
Well, and we're with you, because the question was asked of us, what
that's-
happens if we don't get the White Birch Lane? And that's because, and thank you, Carol, for bringing that up, and thank you, Mr. Chair, because the absolute point is the 44 lots do not require that specific connection, obviously, from an ordinance standpoint. But as stated, in good faith with this board, and knowing how important it was to this board, we have pursued this, and we are pursuing it with the full intent of obtaining that right-of-way to make that connection. Obviously, if we have the planning board saying, they want this connection, and the council saying they do not, then obviously, the applicants at that point in time obviously have to reassess their situation and proceed accordingly.
To further that, thank you. To further that, these conditions of approval are based on this 44-unit project. We're not looking, we're thinking, but we're not looking.
I'm taking that down.
Would the board like to hear? Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Vincent Marietta from KV Enterprises. We agree with the board that White Birch should be built, and we went through a great deal of expense to get it designed, to get it in front of you. However, putting a condition on there, I think, would send a message to a couple of the councilors that may not want the project to get built ever, to just put a roadblock and say, okay, you're not building the project because we're not going to give you White Birch. So my concern would just be that. If it gets approved tonight with White Birch on the drawing, and then we're unable to do it, then we would have to come back to you and amend the subdivision plan that got approved because it would be inconsistent with what was approved. So I'd rather come back before you in the event that the council doesn't approve it. But we did have a very good meeting with them, and we have sort of a conditional consensus. They wanted us to do a few things for the school department and some random things that have nothing to do with the project, and we've got a method to do that. I really think we're going to get approval for that in a few weeks. However, I think it would be bad to say the project's dead if the road's dead, because I think that just opens up a huge roadblock for us that a couple of people could shut the whole project down, and then it would get crazy.
So I appreciate that, thank you. So just to follow up, based on his comments, because the plan was written with the White Birch connection as part of the plan, if it wasn't approved, the applicant would have to come back to us with the revised plan.
Certainly.
Okay, then, thank you.
Thank you.
That was the whole thing that I was trying to address when I first made the comment, so I appreciate it if that is built in.
And if I may, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Just, yeah, that the ordinances require 2 points of connection. Without White Birch Lane, they'd have 2.5. So, based on what they proposed, they could make the argument that it would meet the ordinances without White Birch Lane. However, there are, as we've discussed, many advantages to having that connection. So it makes for a better project. So I think it's up to you if you want to include that as a condition or not. You could write a condition that would say something to the effect of that a connection shall be provided through White Birch Lane, and if it is not provided, the planning board will have to approve a plan without the connection or something to that effect.
Thank you.
It's up to the board.
Thank you. Where are we, folks?
Mr. Chairman, I have to say I'm a little disappointed with this way this discussion's gone. I look back to the amount of public input we've had here. Traffic issues have been brought before this board in several public hearings. And that was kind of the impetus for the entire White Birch discussion. I realize there are residents on White Birch who are not in favor of this. That's very apparent. But the discussion had been that this original phase 1 would include White Birch Lane. That's really one of the only reasons I can support it. And I realize that our former chairman wrote a letter of support, and I realize that all we can do is recommend. But I would really prefer to see this approval process that we have that White Birch Lane approved and have that kind of in our pocket when we vote on this. It's kind of like, Jim, I realize the way you look at sending a message to the council, I look at it as, hey, council, we're not approving this thing till you do your job and get this thing done. Either say no or say yes, so we can then make an informed decision, because I have a really hard time separating this 44 units from the whole picture, because we've all seen the big picture. You can't stick the genie back in the bottle. Just give me a moment here. So, I feel like we're being squeezed by politics.
Sure.
No, we are being squeezed by politics. So I'm having a harder time to support this. We want more, we need more housing. This fits the bill. This is a very developable piece of land. It's going to be developed, whether it's this project or the next project. And it's close to the village. It fits a lot of the criteria. I realize that. So yes, it can be approved, but I'm still having a real hard time with this over the White Birch Lane not being approved yet, and us being asked to approve it, not knowing that that's going to be done. Very conflicted on this.
Thank you so much. Very, very well said.
I'm sorry, but
Anyone else? Mr. Frank?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Contractor, Mr. Walsh, was it 7 times we looking at this? There's like 12 findings have been met. And I don't think we should be sort of like kicking this back and forth between the council and us in terms of how many lots and contract zones and all that stuff. If these folks have met their requirements, and in my view they have, then let's approve it and move it along.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. Anyone else? Well, ladies and gentlemen, on page 47, we have a couple of proposed motions. If we're ready to move on.
Mr. Chairman, one final question.
Please, Mr. Walsh.
What was the final status of Ridgeway? Is it, I know it's been kicked back and forth, is it accessed, is it part of this? Is it be one way, or what was the final outcome of that?
It was going to be up to the Public Works Department when we had a meeting with staff, and they were encouraging it to be a one-way road out. Just a one-way road out. However, that we wouldn't control that. We would build it to whatever standards they wanted to be a two-way. However, they may elect to have us put signs up that dedicate it to be a one-way, but that wasn't up to us. They were talking about the snow plowing and so forth when we had the staff meeting.
Is that written into the plan that way?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I missed it. Okay. Good.
You good? Okay, going back again, page 47, we have proposed motion.
Why are you looking at me? Because it was my word. Mr. Frank.
Mr. Frank.
Final subdivision approval. Move to grant final subdivision approval for Roby Street subdivision located on M24/L19, 20, and M25/L8, M27/L20 in the urban residential and urban residential expansion zoning districts based on findings of fact and conditions of approval as written by the town planner, left paren, and amended by the planning board, right paren, period.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Is there any other discussion?
I would just like to say that I'm swayed by the fact that if the White Birch Lane is written into the plan, and if it's not approved, that the plan comes back. And so that's really what has allowed me to feel comfortable about taking this vote.
Are you comfortable moving forward and approving this, or do you want?
I'm comfortable taking the vote, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Anyone else? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Mr. Walsh opposed? Thank you very much.
We thank you for your time. It was nothing to it, right?
Okay.
Good luck.
Mr. Walsh, if I can just, your opposition was because White Birch Lane has not been already approved? Is that, I don't want to take words out of your mouth.
My opposition is that White Birch Lane has not been approved and the contract zone has not been approved. I would like to see the big picture. And I am not opposed to the subdivision.
Thank you.
I'm opposed to the process.
Oh.
I've found this process to be really frustrating.
Thank you for that.
Now, I certainly want to go on record on that.
How are we doing? Are we okay? Do we want to shake our legs for a minute? Do we want a 5-minute break? Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. McCullough, we're going to take a 5-minute break, please.
Perfect.
I'm going to look up at Ben. 5 minutes, please. Thank you. Your mic is a live mic. Monday evening, September 9th, 2024. It's about 9:05 p.m. We're on to item 4 of the agenda. This is a discussion, final and preliminary subdivision, JDP Limited Liability Corporation, North Gorham Road subdivision. A request for approval to construct a 5-lot single-family subdivision, map 92, lot 25, zoned SR. The applicant is represented by Owens McCullough, PE, with Sebago Techniques. I look to the planning department to open this up for us.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So what we have before us is a proposal. It's been before the board once previously for sketch plan review in March of this year. The applicant's proposing to create 5 new buildable lots for single-family homes. They're not proposing to create any roads or infrastructure along those lines. The lots would be served by existing public streets, North Gorham Road, Great Falls Road. The proposals in line with the comprehensive plan and existing zoning. No major natural resources constraints are noted. There's some wetlands on site that have been delineated. The notes do note that state that the calculation for water supply needs to be provided. They actually have provided that. Just wanted to make sure that's clear for the board. For 7 units, which is the maximum build out for the proposed subdivision area. Also, I wanted to note that they've shown an out sale lot that was previously shown as lot 6 on the plans, but we provided feedback to the applicant that the way the subdivision law requires that to be shown is that it be on the plans but not considered as part of the subdivision analysis, and they've gone ahead and done that, shown everything there appropriately. So the board did make a finding at its March meeting that based on the water supply calculations that had been provided, that it was infeasible to provide public water or sewer to the site. So one motion, potential motion that we flagged for the board, the applicant is looking to get preliminary and final subdivision approval in one meeting, and that is something that may be done at the board's discretion. If you, at the end of the packet, you'll find proposed motions that show the wording to approve for preliminary and final, or to continue the item. So it's up to at the board's discretion. But the motion language is here. So some outstanding items based on discussion with the Public Works Director. There are some road frontage improvements that would be needed, and we've included a proposed condition of approval number 17 and 18, working with the applicant, that would address some of those issues with a $2,500 per lot fee and a requirement for ditching requirements on lot 5 specifically, that would then require approval from the Public Works Director before a certificate of occupancy could be granted. So it looks like they've addressed most of the items that have come up as part of the sketch plan review and staff review. One additional item that is needed is they provided the map for the Class B soil survey, but we look for the applicant to address where the narrative report for that is. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Yakolev. You said there were 18 items? I only have 17 on mine.
I only have 17 too.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Yes, so it was a late development. I should have mentioned that. There is, I can provide the wording to the board for the proposed condition of approval 18.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. McCullough can discuss this further, but we've tightened it up a little bit from what's shown on the plans I think he'll show you, but it's that as part of the Lot 5 driveway construction, Lot 5 owners shall complete ditching improvements along the frontage of Lot 5 on North Gorham Road.
You are going way too fast if you're
I will slow
supposed to be
down.
writing this.
It's in the digital version also.
Oh, okay, it's on the digital version.
It is.
Okay.
For the benefit of the audience, I'd be happy to read this into the record. You want me to?
I think, well, and you know, to move things along, if it's the digital copy that already has it, shame on me for not having access to the latest digital copy. I don't know that it's necessarily needed to be read into the record. Does anyone else? We're good with that? Thank you for your effort. Ready for Mr. McCullough?
Yes.
Sir, you have the floor.
Well, Damon covered most of it, so I'll just touch on a couple of highlights, and I won't go over the whole thing for time. So I met with Terry Deering up on site. There was a condition of approval for $2,500 for a lot to go to roadway improvements. The applicant, that would be assessed at the time a building permit is taken out for each lot. That's fine. On lot 5, which is the only lot that's accessed off North Gorham Road, there's a high point and there's some ditching that would have to be associated with the driveway. That would be made a condition of the lot 5. That ditching has to be done before the lot 5 could get their certificate of occupancy, so it's written right in there. I do have one question. I think originally there was a note in the staff report about a financial guarantee from the developer, but I think that was in there before I met with Terry and we worked that out to put that on the lot 5, because it's really part of the lot 5 driveway. So as long as we're all good on that, I'm good, because there's really, it's just part of lot 5. Then the other item was, there was a request from the peer reviewer for a letter from the licensed site evaluator that suitable soils or test pits are on site for septic, and you could get wells on the lot. So we always submit the test pits that show passing test pits. The symbol shows that there are suitable soils on it. I'll be glad to have them do that if you want that letter. And these are pretty good sized lots, so we're not too concerned about that. But if that's something you'd like, I'll have Gary generate that letter and we can submit that as a condition of approval. And I will talk to we did submit a Class B high intensity soil survey map. Didn't provide the narrative because the soils are almost all identical. They're all sandy silt. So I wasn't sure that that would bring any value or any benefit, because all the narrative does is it says these 3 types of soils are sandy loam soils, and this is the soil horizon. So I didn't see that it would bring any material value and that the plan was more important. We're more than happy to do it as a condition of approval if the board wants that. I just didn't see that it really added anything to the technical support of the project, because the wetlands were mapped, the soils were dug, and frankly the plan provides the high intensity soils map that's signed by Gary, the site of soil scientist, provides much more meaningful information. So I'll leave that to the board. If you want me to do it, no problem, we'll do it. I was just trying to keep it simple. And other than that, we would be asking for preliminary and final. The staff conditions are fine, and we're ready to go forward tonight. I told you I'd make it quick.
Thank you, Mr. McCullough. Members of the board.
David
Questions?
Burrows?
Yes, Mr.
I've
Burrows,
got a
please.
question on page 6 of the notes. This is stormwater comments for this project are as follows. Number 3, while not a main DEP requirement, the applicant should consider alternate plans which maintain the existing vernal pools in the parcel. So does that mean that there are vernal pools in the parcels?
There were non-significant vernal pools by the DEP standard on it, and that is in the wetland that is right here. We're not proposing to touch any wetlands. There are no wetland impacts part of the project, so those will be kept.
And when a house is built on that, will that affect it?
No, because the wetlands won't be touched. They'll be preserved.
Thanks for answering that.
You're welcome.
That's all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Burrows. Anyone else? Colonel,
Sorry,
please.
I have a question for the staff on the narrative report, because I don't see it as a waiver here, so it's not something that you expected us to consider, or are we expecting that to be a condition of approval? I didn't see if it was written in the conditions of approval. Or do we need to have a motion for a waiver, or is that something that we don't have to consider?
It could be a waiver if you wanted to waive that submission requirement.
What's the staff's position on whether the narrative is needed based on the?
We'll do it either way.
Just to be clear, the planning board did already waive the requirement for a Class A survey to a Class B. So that's what we're, discussing. So has the Class B survey been provided? The map has been provided, but not the narrative that would typically be attached to that, to make it a complete
We'll make it
report.
simple. I'll just do the narrative. It's 3 pages of it.
Thank you.
This is exactly my opinion.
We'll just
They
do it.
have it. They have it.
It's,
Send it-
it's
send
not
it.
worth taking your time over that.
Okay.
We'll do it.
So then, since it hasn't been done, if we're going to consider the motion, it needs to be added as a condition.
Well, it could be considered under condition number 2, all staff and peer review comments shall be addressed prior to the board signing the plans.
Thank
So
you.
we don't need to make a separate condition. I believe we just make sure that the applicant provides that.
Ladies and gentlemen, on page 3, there is a suggested motion to move to approve the requested waiver from Chapter 3, Section 3-3, C-15, to grant preliminary and final subdivision approval at the same meeting. Colonel, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Go for it.
I move to approve the requested waiver from Chapter 3 of Section 3-3, C-15, to grant preliminary and final subdivision approval at the same meeting.
Thank you, Colonel.
Frank,
Mr.
second?
Frank, second. Thank you. Any discussion? We understand what's happening here? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you. Then I guess, can we go directly to page 14?
Always good to get to the last page.
Mr. Chair?
Please.
Can I make a motion to grant preliminary and final subdivision approval for North Gorham Road subdivision located on map 92, lot 25 in the suburban residential zoning district based on finding of fact and conditions of approval as written by the town planner?
Which includes item 18.
Which is the current, yes.
Right.
Which is the current version of the,
Correct. Some of us have some, but 18 is included in that.
yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Frank? Oh, okay.
You guys want to do rock, paper, scissors? I'll take Mr. Walsh this time. Any other discussion? Are we comfortable with this? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McCullough.
Thank you for your time. Have a good evening.
Thank you. You as well.
Moving right along.
That brings us to item number 5. Number 5 on our agenda. Item 5 is a discussion. Sketch plan review, Cressy's Apartment, Flaggy Meadow Road, LLC. Cressy Apartments, a request to construct 16 units of apartment housing in 2 8-unit buildings, parking and associated infrastructure, Zone SR, apologize. Map 36, lots 12 and 15.001. The applicant is represented by Troy McDonald with Northeast Civil Solutions. I look to staff to please open this up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to introduce this item, it's the first time it's been before the planning board, and they're looking to build 16 new units of housing at an existing site that currently has 28 units of apartment housing, parking, and associated infrastructure. The proposal is consistent with comprehensive plan and the existing zoning. There are some natural resource constraints on the parcel as a whole, but not in the area where they're proposing the new development to be added. The project will likely require a DEP stormwater permit, given its size. As far as utilities go, the applicant is proposing the development be served by public water and private on-site septic. The nearest public sewer connection is just over 6,000 feet away. They understand that underground utilities will be provided, will be required for the project. And also wanted to flag that because this is subdivision review, even though a large portion of the lot is not proposed to be developed, because it's on the same parcel, it will need to be reviewed for wetlands and soil characteristics. Also wanted to flag that our zoning performance standards found in Chapter 2, Section 2-4B, the standards for multifamily housing, has two sections, one for suburban residential, and one for our denser zones. So the applicant will need to look to those performance standards and meet them. One that in particular we wanted to flag that we'd like to hear more information about and suggest the board ask about is the access road drive and how that will be located, whether there'll be one or 2 points of connection. As it stands, the applicant's proposing one connection through the existing parking lot and driveway system for the existing apartments with emergency access, and the board may want to discuss with the applicant whether that meets the needs for the development or whether a second point of connection should be added. And engineering, public works flagged that, and planning as well as flagged the access is something that will need some attention and some discussion with the applicants. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Yakovlev. Mr. McDonald.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. I'm actually not Mr. McDonald. He couldn't be here tonight, so my name is Bill Garish. I'm with Northeast Civil Solutions. I'm a civil engineer. Also, Connor Barassa from Northeast Civil Solutions is here with me, and we're here with regards to the Cressy Apartments proposed project on Flaggy Meadow Road, and representing Stephanie Cressy and Cressy Apartments, Flaggy Meadow Road, LLC. I will start out just quickly with a brief overview of the existing conditions plan. And Flaggy Meadow Road is down at the bottom of the sheet, as you can see here, and the town of Gorham would be off to the east. And currently, on the westerly side of this particular site, there are 5 apartment buildings, Cressy Apartments, that currently exist. There's also a single-family rental dwelling in this location. And then over on the easterly side of the site, there is a duplex dwelling unit, 2 units. This house in the middle is on a different parcel of land. You can see there's also a big, a big barn located in this part of the site. And I'll just back up a couple. I have a aerial of the site, which gives you a little better picture of the landscape. You can see the 5 apartment buildings in this location, the single family, the duplex over here. Lots of nice lawn areas and landscaping, the barn area out back, and the wooded area beyond. These open areas out in the rear of this particular site service wastewater disposal systems for the existing 5 apartment buildings located here. So I will, just from there, I'll move on quickly to the I'll show you the boundary survey for the project. So we have the site we were looking at is all located in this area over here. The site, this boundary survey was for 3 particular parcels, all owned by Cressy Apartments, Flaggy Meadow Road, LLC, all separate deeds and separate parcels. Parcel A is off to the west of the proposed development. That includes 39.8 acres, plus or minus. Parcel B in this location in the center is 26.8 acres, and parcel C, located on the east side, is 19.6 acres. You can see Little River crosses through all three parcels, or actually parcels A and C on the north end of the site. And again, here's the proposed development site, or the proposed Cressy Apartments expansion project, an existing development, which is all located on parcels B and C. So the overall parcels B and C would be approximately 3966 acres in total. And Adams Drive, which is a private drive, a gravel road, is off to the east of the site. Again, public access on Flaggy Meadow Road down here. And I moved on to the proposed site plan for the proposed two apartment buildings. Again, 2 apartment buildings, there'll be 2 stories each, 8 units in each building. And there are basically 10 parking spaces proposed at each entrance. There is an entrance proposed on either end of the building. So 10 parking spaces, a total of 40. And there is another entrance on the west side of each building, which is basically the entrance to the mechanical room and the electric entrance and so forth. So the site is proposed to be accessed from Flaggy Meadow Road through the existing Cressy Apartments access road, and then continuing on into the site on the west side or in the center of the site. In order to build that access off the existing access drive, a small portion of the existing barn would be removed. We are showing a secondary access, which again is for identified for emergency vehicles only. Currently, we're showing a 16-foot wide access road that was in your packet that comes off the existing parking lot for the duplex. Based on our meeting with the town staff and comments received, we are going to upgrade this road to a width of 20 feet, which was deemed adequate for the fire equipment and so forth. And the construction of this road will continue out through to Flaggy Meadow Road in this location. So again, this will be upgraded and expanded out to the road, again, to remain proposed as an emergency access road. There has been a traffic study that just got completed. It wasn't in your package, but will be in the preliminary submission or the next submission. And the traffic study identified the number of peak hour trips, which were relatively small. The site distance was checked and found to be adequate. Certainly the capacity on Flaggy Meadow Road would not be impacted. There's plenty of capacity there for the existing trips associated with the proposed apartment units. And there were no high crash locations located in the vicinity of the site. So again, we will be providing that traffic study as we move forward. Utilities proposed for the site. There is public water out on Flaggy Meadow Road, which is proposed to provide water source for not just domestic water, but also for the sprinkler systems. We will propose to bring that in on the east side of the site in conjunction with constructing the road through that area. And there will be, based on discussion with town staff, we will be including a fire hydrant in the development, a private fire hydrant. wastewater disposal, or actually, I'll back up, electric and telecommunications utilities will be brought in underground. There's currently overhead lines into the existing apartment complex, so we would propose to go underground from the last pole and to feed that. We're still coordinating that with the utility companies, and as an option, we could always come in from a utility pole underground from Flaggy Meadow Road. Wastewater disposal, there is no public sewer in vicinity of the site. We are proposing wastewater disposal systems, on-site disposal systems with a capacity of 1,500 gallons. We would propose 2 separate systems, one for each building. The soil conditions on this site are pretty good. We did have a wetland delineation done, or an initial wetland delineation done for the development area. Soils were good. There were no wetlands found. The limiting factors in any location here would be the shallow bedrock, which does exist kind of on the easterly side of the site, but there are adequate soils between the 2 buildings. There are some good soils between the parking area, in the vicinity of the parking area and the barn, especially to the east side. So our site evaluators currently, he did his field work recently, and he's currently working on those designs. So we will have those for you coming up in the future as well. And then just finally, I'll go to the site grading. Blow this up a little bit. So the grades for the site do, they go down as you go from the road. The grades at the road at this location is around elevation, I think this is 260. And then as you progress to the rear of the site, way back here, it's elevation 240. So it is quite a distance. Grades are relatively gradual until you get back to this location, but it does slope from the road, sloping down, going back, obviously towards the river. The 2 buildings are proposed to be the high points of this particular grading of the site. We do, on the south side of the proposed improvements, we would propose some catch basins and basically collect the runoff from the barn area, moving this way through the parking lots, and then conveying that stormwater out to eventually some stormwater treatment areas. There is curbing proposed around the buildings, sidewalks with accessible ramps and so forth, but the outer perimeter of the pavement is proposed to just drain off the site in the form of sheet flow, at least with this initial rendition. We haven't run all the stormwater calculations yet. We have shown potential stormwater filter ponds that would potentially be located in this location and this location. Again, we haven't sized those. They probably are shown a little bigger than they really need to be, but just for sketch plan, we wanted to get a rough grading plan in there and get you something to look at and comment on. The dumpster locations are located on each end of the site, here and here. So we do agree that the proposed impervious areas do, at least with this rendition, look to be over an acre, so we would have to do a full stormwater permit with the DEP. So we would be heading in that direction with the stormwater, not only meeting the town standards, but also the DEP standards. And I think we are fully on board with all the initial comments. I will say, I guess, and we can, we're anxious to hear your input, but we are in accordance with the private right-of-way, I guess. We aren't proposing a private right-of-way. We're proposing access to the site from the public right-of-way on Flaggy Meadow Road, again, through the existing apartment complex as an extension to this apartment complex, again, with the secondary access on the east side. And I think that's about what I had. I'm certainly open to any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Garish. Members of the board? Mr. Frank?
First, lovely detailed sketch plan. Nice work.
Thank you.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes, and yes, it's a very comprehensive sketch plan. Thank you. Just two questions. First off, what is the barn used for?
I haven't been in the barn myself, but it's used for storage, and yeah, I believe it's just storage. Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Okay. I'm just
Yep.
curious when I've driven by.
Yep.
Secondly, when I look at the site, I realize these are two-bedroom apartments, correct?
They're all proposed to be two-bedroom apartments. Yeah.
So, and you know, your driveway orientation, all right, you know, it's going to work. It's a little awkward, you know, the way you're in the back there. And I'm just thinking, okay, two-bedroom apartments, you can still have kids, parents with kids, school-age kids. I'm thinking bus stop, and now I'm thinking about how they walk out to the street. You have sidewalks within the newer section. Are there sidewalks in the existing section?
There are no existing sidewalks in the older section, other than some short sections of sidewalk just from the parking areas directly into the units.
I'm sure your client knows their you know, typical resident and knows what their clientele is. But if there is a number of school-age children in there, I guess I just ask for consideration on how they will access the street, and you know, it'd be nice to even have a school bus shelter out there, but something to think about.
Yeah, no, that's a good comment. Yeah.
So
Colonel, please.
Yeah, so probably for you to address, but also from the staff. So just for my understanding, what are the open space requirements for this proposal? Or are there any?
Yeah, well, they'd have to pay into the recreation and open space.
But there's no requirement to have physical open space on the site?
Not under the performance standards.
And is that because it's a condominium or an apartment complex?
Generally, the open space requirements for developments can be met by paying the recreation and open space impact fee. There are separate requirements for open space that are part of development transfer, which is was considered under the some other projects that have been considered by the board.
But not
in this
case. I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around, because it seems to be they're adding on to an existing residential area, adding more people to it, right? But so at some point there would be a need to, I don't know if this is maybe a future code discussion when we review the planning board or the comprehensive plan. But at some point, I guess, when you could just keep adding these apartment buildings on and go through the rest of the property and never have sidewalks and open spaces for people to be able to use inside of the development. So I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around that. I mean, there's a lot of land around, but it doesn't seem like there's any a basketball court or something for residents some space for the residents to be able to create their own use, you know, whatever they wanted to do, play cornhole or whatever they wanted to do on weekends. So I'm just.
But he's got some proposed area in between the two buildings for.
Yeah.
Right, so I guess is there any plan or comment for
open space?
For a formal open space or a gazebo or a common area like that?
You know, we haven't proposed anything. I mean, we have spread the buildings apart quite a bit, you know, just to create the space around there and so forth, but we haven't proposed anything specific in there. We can certainly consider that.
It's not a requirement,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
that's why I'm asking.
One thing just to clarify.
Yep.
Carol has pointed out that there is a requirement for 250 square feet of common outdoor space for each dwelling unit, which shall be developed with appropriate recreation facilities. So there is actually a separate requirement. Sorry about that.
Is that per per multi-unit?
Per dwelling unit, so for each of the 16 units.
16 times 250?
Yes, correct.
The applicant will have to look at the multifamily housing requirements. And so those requirements are under that section. There's a whole set of performance standards to look at.
Additionally, there's a requirement for 250 square feet of private outdoor space for each dwelling unit. So that could be a patio or that kind of.
Okay, so when you come back, I know this is just preliminary, right? But I guess thank you. That's why I asked the question, because I didn't know. And I would like to, obviously have some more details on that in the future.
Sure, yep. Yeah, each unit does have, the lower units do have a patio. They're shown in these areas, and the upper units would have a deck in the same location. But yeah, we'll certainly, consider that and look through all the standards to make sure those are addressed.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Please, Mr. Frank.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, as I said, I got a nice sketch plan, and at the sketch plan approval level, the details need not to be forthcoming right now.
Yep.
In my opinion. Thank you.
Anyone?
If I could ask one question of you, I know we do have to perform the net density calculations. We do have a lot of land, and I will actually back up to the boundary survey. So yeah, everything we have is here. We do have a lot of land, so with the existing units and the proposed units, we're going to be, in the 40s, I guess, as far as total number of units on the parcel. I know there is a requirement to, with the net density calculations, to subtract out wetlands and things like that, which we would certainly identify the wetland areas in the other areas of the site. There is also a requirement for a high-intensity soil survey. This parcel is served by public water. So I'm not sure if we need to request a waiver to do the Class B survey as opposed to the Class A survey. And secondly, we do have areas on the site that, particularly back here, that would be in the 100-year flood zone, potentially some areas of steep slopes and isolated areas across the river and so forth, that would automatically be deducted out of the net density calculations anyways. I guess we would ask for a little leniency on where our whole project is all happening in this little area up here. Again, we understand we got to check for wetlands, but I mean, if we didn't have to do a high-intensity soil survey over the entire site, and particularly the areas that are, in the back that are going to be deducted anyways, that would be helpful.
Walsh?
Those are great questions you're raising. And I guess the thing that just strikes me, and this is just a conceptual question, and tell me if I'm totally off base. Is there any benefit, if you're continuing to develop this site, is there any benefit to parceling that out, such as that, you take the back properties and bring them in to parcel A? I realize it's a legal question and costs money. No matter what you do, it costs money. But might it be a least cost option if you're going to continue to work with this, developing one end of the site?
That's definitely been discussed, and we're considering it, and depending on how the numbers all work out once we do the calculations, if we don't have to redo surveys and deeds, that would be best, but certainly a consideration.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyone else? Any concerns, anything we want to share, anything we want to express? Planning?
Just to answer the question about the soil survey, in this zone, and, you know, when development's on public water, that can be waived from Class A to Class B. So that is something that the planning board may do.
This evening, you mean?
You may, it's up to the board. Is that something the applicant is requesting, I guess is the first question there.
Ms. Nichols?
Are you requesting to waive soil testing altogether, or just having to do it for the entire parcel?
Well, I would request the waiver from Class A to Class B due to the public water as kind of a straightforward request, and then as a more, I guess, less straightforward request, a waiver to not conduct the soil survey in the areas that are already deducted from the net residential calculations. Does that make sense?
Theoretically, to me, that makes sense, but I don't know if we have, like, is that something that the town recognizes and that's easily parsed out? We talk about the part that's been deducted for the net residential calculation.
I mean, we would demonstrate that we have the amount of acreage adequate for the number of units, and then.
That'd be easy.
Yeah, so maybe that doesn't even require a waiver, I'm not sure, but just thought I'd ask the question.
Well, let's tackle one at a time. I believe there's a suggestion that we waive to allow a Class B soil survey.
Is that a motion on the?
I can't make the motion.
No, I understand, but
It's not written out.
this is a sketch plan review. Do we entertain waivers at this point, or would the applicant need to bring that back at preliminary?
What normally happens is applicants will either put it in their application materials. We actually have a formal waiver request page. You fill out the section and paragraph numbers, what you want to waiver for, and give justification for and reason for it. That way, when the board is considering it, you know what the justification is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Sounds like we should wait. Do you agree?
Yes.
By consensus, everyone agree on that? Is there anything else? Okay, Mr. Garish, I think we're done here.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
So you'll follow up on the application for the, thank you.
Yep, certainly will.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Good to see some more high-density housing.
Colonel, you mentioned earlier that you wanted to say something under other business?
Oh, other business. So I'm in full support of the paperless option that we were informed of, but I do find value in having at least the notes. Sometimes are really helpful to have, especially when I'm reviewing things ahead of time. So I would just and we don't have to decide this tonight, and I'd want to have a discussion about it, but is there value in just getting the notes pages for each item, not the whole book, just the notes? So we could review them and have something prepared before we show up on hard copy.
Well said, Colonel.
Yeah.
I'm an old paper and pencil and yellow highlighter kind of guy. And yeah, our chair has, about 8 or 9 pounds? But yes, it's a good thing to reduce paperwork that ends up in that purple bin over there. I love working with the staff. I step into the office and I get the stuff I have now, the staff notes and the addenda. So yes, Well said, and I agree. Thank you.
Mr. Walsh?
So for about over the first year I was on the board, I would sit here and I would try to do it without, because I didn't know there was an option to get them. And then this guy shows up and he sits next to me and I see him have these nice printouts all the time and I'm just drooling over them, you know? And I found myself printing more and more of them and said, that's just stupid, Dave. Why are you doing this? You're spending my money doing this for be a good citizen. But then I signed up for the printing, and not only that, I got delivery to the house. I can't tell you how wonderful it has been. And I just sit down with these and I write my notes, I scribble my notes and questions in the margins and circle and highlight things. So yeah, your little PC will be a mess if I do that with it. Take the highlighter to it, it doesn't work well. So I would very much like to continue to get the notes. But I do have, so that's one thing, but I do have a question. When you say that you want to go entirely paperless or electronic, does that include the stuff that the submittals from the engineering firms?
We are moving toward an electronic submission permitting process. So if they want to submit, we don't have to be in the office to get this stuff across the counter. They can do it at 3 in the morning if they want.
Right.
And that's the idea. So in that case, we'd have one electronic version, hopefully of every single thing we need, and then one paper version because that's required by the state.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, most of the engineering packet we don't use, but like the plat, the site plan, I mean, I'm always making notes on that. And very rare, with the bigger stuff, I mean, sketch plans maybe not, but really I do appreciate seeing that. It's so hard to see on the screen, and then forget trying to print it because you're not going to be able to print it at a size that's worthwhile. But, I will admit, 90% of it you don't use. You got 40 sheets, 50 sheets, you're using 3 or 4. As a former paper maker, I like that, but I understand, but I would very much like to continue to get the notes, please.
I agree.
I think there's value in paper, marking it up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again, to Mr. Frank's point, I don't know that I need this submittal, but I do want the planning department's papers and comments and things like that. And if some of those are 48 pages, so be it. It's better than 400 pages here. I think they got the hint. I think. We'll find out next month.
That's all I had, thank you.
Is there any other business to come before us?
Move to adjourn.
Mr. Walsh, anyone want to second that?
Second that.
Ms. Nichols? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Good evening. Thank you to members of the board. Thank you to the planning department. Thank you to Ben Dyke.
Yes. 5 minutes to spare.